In this video, we're going to take a look at a Pelikan M120. Let's jump straight to the end with my thoughts on this pen. This is a pen that I really do enjoy using, and it's another one of those pens that falls into a category for me that I would typically think isn't really for me. It's much smaller than I really tend to go for. However, it's very comfortable in the hand and gives a very pleasant writing experience the entire time, which, although I believe this to be a limited pen, the Idilic Blue, but it was a pen that when I saw I wanted and held out on, and then eventually it wound up on a clearance, which is where I picked it up and why I went for it, because I already have a couple Pelikans of this size, being the 200s, and I didn't see a need for another one. It was that deal that I was seeing that made me really say, without a doubt. So when I think about this pen, I kind of think about it in terms of that deal. It wasn't enough to make me jump at it initially. However, given a slight opportunity where it was more affordable in my head, then absolutely. This is a pen that I think if you can pick it up on the aftermarket and with any kind of a decent deal, it's definitely worth jumping on. Now that we know what I think of the Pelikan M120, let's see how I got to that opinion, starting with the unboxing. The Pelikan M120 comes in a box like this, which contains a box like this, containing another box, containing a sleeve that does not have that little medallion like you see on so many of the sleeves for Pelikan pens. I like that the box itself is different than their normal packaging, and while I typically really enjoy their simple and consistent packaging, I think if you put out a special pen, it can get a special box. It's not so special that the packaging drives up the price. With the pen out of the box, we need to get to the nib. Now, to be honest, as long as it doesn't take 20 turns to uncap a pen, I'm fine. But how many turns does this pen take to get uncapped? The Pelikan M120 takes just under 1 turn to uncap. At just under 1 turn to uncap, it is absolutely a great note-taker's pen. It really is superb to deal with. It uncaps so fast, you practically don't even realize how fast it is. This gets us to the nib. This pen has a fine steel nib. My picture taking was a little bit off in this one, but this nib is not the same design as on the other Pelikan nibs, which in that if you wanted to simply replace this nib, you would either have to concede to one of their standard nibs or really have to seek this out. So while I like how the nib looks, there could be that disadvantage if you saw it that way. If you enjoy videos like this, then be sure to hit the subscribe button. Now, let's ink this pen up. The Pelikan M120 is a piston fill fountain pen that holds approximately 1.7 milliliters of ink. The ink for today is Diatramentis Artist Purple. At just over about 1.5 mils of ink, I think this holds plenty for a student going and doing their daily note-taking, even if you're a heavy note-taker when you're in class. And the fact that the piston moves so smoothly makes it not any kind of a chore for refilling. As a habit, I don't normally post my pens, but some pens need to be posted, and some people prefer to post their pens. The Pelikan M120 does post, and it posts securely. I find I need to post it in order to be able to use it comfortably. Now, the important part, the writing sample. Like a lot of Pelikan pens, this is really smooth to write with, even as a fine nib. Now, typically, as a nib becomes finer, it becomes much more feedbacky, and that's really not the case here. It stays very smooth, and if you want that feedback, then you're going to need to make sure that you're using a paper that has a little bit more tooth to it so that you can feel it. Otherwise, super smooth all the time. Now, a lot of people, that's not a problem. And it's really not. I find it very comfortable to write with. Its nib is nice and soft under my hand. I wouldn't call it flexy, I would call it soft. If I was to give any kind of a downside, it's that for me, I really do feel a need to post this pen to use it most comfortably. That also has to do with where I hold it, because I do hold it a little bit farther back than just on the section. I hold it right about on those threads, but they're not sharp, they're not uncomfortable, they're not distracting. It's very comfortable to use, very lightweight. So if a lightweight pen is something that's a concern for you, this is it. Now, as far as being able to look at it, it doesn't stand out in any really special way. It does stand out in that it looks very nice and it draws a little bit of attention, but it's not screaming, "Look at me." So it's very understated in that design. And again, in just writing with it at meetings and at trainings, it didn't do anything that drew any kind of real attention and didn't cause me to need to sit and answer questions or get the whole, I need to try and write with that. While I don't mind lending my pens out to people, it's if they feel a need to write with my pen that I feel squeamish. It's understated enough that that doesn't happen, and I really do appreciate that a whole lot about this pen. It's really very nice. Now for something a bit more standard in comparing writing size. I use Namiki Blue to do this. Here it is with a Yovo extra fine on the left, medium in the middle, and a 1.1 stub on the right. This fine nib truly does write as a fine. It's not a broader fine like you expect with a lot of Pelikans, but very much a fine nib. So it's always good to me to get exactly what you think you're getting, especially for a bunch of writers in the US that we typically get used to thinner nibs, thinner writing. But how does this nib compare to other nibs that I've used in writing size? Looking at the writing of a Pelikan M120 with a fine nib. Here it is next to a Sailor My First Pen with a medium fine, a Mnemosyne Singularity with a fine nib, a Jinhao 51A with a fine nib, a TWSBI Vac Mini with a fine nib, a TWSBI Mini with a fine nib, a Kaweco Transparent 475 with a vintage flex nib, and a Hero 7035 with a fine nib. It isn't a pen review without doing some size comparisons. Here it is capped. Here it is uncapped. And here it is posted. Having seen the size comparisons, it becomes quite obvious that this is a smaller pen. Now, if smaller pens are for you, this is absolutely a great one. If you can't find this, the M200 is right about the same size. At this point, the pen is dirty. Let's make it clean again. If you want to be able to support not just my channel, but any reviewer, then when you make a purchase, be sure to tell that retailer where you heard about it. Thanks for watching.